Hello, my name is Maurice Washington. I want to welcome everybody to another episode of Executive Talk. Those who are watching live or those who are listening later on our podcast, thank you so much for being here. In today's segment, we're going to talk about protecting your manufacturing business. As you know, every industry needs some kind of business insurance, and this is specifically one that needs a lot of it because there's been a lot of change within the industry. And today we're going to talk about some of those protections that you need and just some of the changes that we've seen post-COVID and where we are today, and really what you need to do to protect your business, your manufacturing business. So without further ado, I want to bring Rick Callaway and also Matt Harvey with AccuSure Insurance. How you gentlemen doing today?
Good, thank you, Maurice.
All right, nice to see you too. Hey, I know from a business insurance perspective, and Matt, take us down the history and just over maybe even like the past 4 years, how the manufacturing business has changed since post-COVID. I know people don't like that word COVID, but nonetheless, it is a staple in everybody's business and everybody has taken some kind of change or impact. What have you seen from a manufacturing perspective?
So what we've seen is that there has been increased demands on manufacturers to produce goods. And in addition to that, we've seen supply chain issues that have arisen out of the lack of raw materials or the inability of logistics networks in order to fulfill orders and to get raw materials to manufacturers in time. We've also seen that the COVID period as well, there were instances where maintenance programs, protections and upgrades weren't able to be undertaken by various organizations in the way that they would have liked or have hoped. And as a result of that, there have been a number of quite significant man-made losses that have occurred following that. In addition to this, and this is just the nature of the world and the nature that things are, there have been heightened and localized natural catastrophe events, which have contributed as well to the disruption to manufacturers and to their supply chains. We've also seen as well, particularly in the United States, the demographics and now with the workforces, there is a lot less people searching for jobs. They can be a lot more picky. They can be a lot more choosy about their destination. So there has also been some manpower issues. But that really is not an insurance matter. That's more something that does contribute towards the issues that manufacturers are facing.
For sure. And when you think about all those issues, one thing that is neutral to all that is cost, the rise of cost, the rise of and it's also costly to the operational component, which in manufacturing, in order for it to exist. So, yeah, I think that's that cause and effect within that model, right?
That's absolutely true. And cost kind of begets cost. So if insurance premiums go up and people reduce their the coverage that they're buying, either the limits or the perils, then there potentially could be a disaster which puts a lot of pressure on their balance sheets. And we've seen that. We do appreciate that costs have gone up on the insurance perspective and the reinsurance perspective for clients, not just in the manufacturing industry, but generally, property rates have gone up. We have seen that stock throughput, though, by contrast, has actually come down. Product liability is roughly the same depending on the industry that you're in. But yes, you're right, Maurice. Absolutely, cost is something which is very difficult to control at the moment, and not just for all of the reasons we said, but inflation. I mean, we've seen great jumps in
Yes.
inflation. So, in the event that a factory burns down, the replacement cost of the machinery, of the building itself, and getting on the waiting list in order to get the
That's right.
replacements done is adding to the costs.
For sure. And that's the thing that I want everybody to pay attention to, especially those that are consultants for the manufacturing industry, manufacturers. When it comes to costs and the increase of costs, and especially premiums and so on and so forth, people, because nobody wants to pay that extra, right? You trying to get that balance sheet under control, but when you see these costs constantly go up, you're looking for the cause and effect. So this is again why we're having this show, and we're actually really touching base on all those components here. So let's go ahead and jump into this and talk about this, because right here you have benefits of facultative reinsurance. And so, can you explain to everybody the importance of this facultative reinsurance?
Yes, and facultative reinsurance is often the unseen entity of the insurance business. So wherever facultative reinsurance enters into the market is when the cedant or the client chooses to access the secondary facultative reinsurance market to provide capacity or coverage which the primary carriers wish to offset or cannot provide to the limits which the client desires. So an example of this would be a primary carrier who may look at a particular risk, see that there is a significant California quake exposure. For example, the client might have a PML of around about, or a loss estimate of around about $100 million. The market cannot give that because of their treaty or because of aggregations that they've got of other properties in that area. So they could well come to the secondary market, to the facultative market, to look at ways of accessing that capacity
Okay.
and topping up the coverages so that the clients can get the desired limits.
Got it. I got it. Go ahead. What were you about to say, Matt? I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're on a good point.
In addition to this, it allows us also to be creative. With
Yes.
facultative reinsurance, it can assist the carriers in driving price, potentially, but really what it's there for is to provide the overall rounded product that the clients desire. So if, for example, there's areas of high floods, manufacturing plants in high flood zones, in wind zones, all of this might create a toxic environment. So we can go out as reinsurance brokers and look at creative ways in order we can introduce additional capacity into programs.
Okay. So when you're introducing these particular programs, are you trying to get creative to create price breaks, or what are you really looking to aim when you have this particular type of insurance?
We're really driven by the client in this respect. So
Okay.
if it's pricing, there's ways that we can go about looking at pricing. Now that might mean introducing a mutual or a reinsurer that maybe not doesn't have the rating but has a strong balance sheet in order to pay losses and has a willingness to pay loss. Someone that's on our approved security list. It may well be that the client wishes to increase, as I've mentioned before, natural catastrophe limits or
Okay.
other limits within a policy. So it's there to marry up the desire of what the client wants versus what the client's getting. In addition to that, where there is a big client, they may take a significant deductible or excess, which they would pay as the first part of their loss. In a number of cases where there are self-insured retentions, we can also buy down those self-insured retentions. So I've worked for in the past for a large European brewer. That large
Okay.
European brewer, they had a self-insured retention of 5 million euros. We would buy that down to 2 million euros, getting reinsurance for 3 million euros, but that would be aggregated. So they would have two losses. It would erode, but it would give them the option to purchase lower excess insurance, which would complement their overall global property program which they're purchasing.
And I need you to correct me if I'm wrong here because I don't want to spread any false information, but in that facultative reinsurance, does that mean that you're in conjunction with another insurance company in order to work these rates? Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct. We are
Okay.
reinsurance. So we
Got
would
it.
work with the cedant. And so the cedant might be one of the large US carriers, primary carriers
Sure.
that are out there, from a whole list of people, from literally from A to Z, if you know your industry, and
Right.
everyone kind of in between on that. And we would work with them because we would be reinsuring the cedant. So we would be providing reinsurance from the specialist market for the cedant to take on their balance sheet.
Got it. All right. Well, let's shift over to the manufacturing reinsurance. So, yeah, property insurance, inherent risk explained. So, talk to us about some of this property insurance and how this reinsurance works.
So property insurance, I mean, it's old. It goes back. There's a monument just around the corner from my office, 1666, when London burnt down and the first fire
Right.
offices were created. And although the Dutch will argue that they started property insurance and marine insurance before the English, but that's
That's a
the
whole
nature of
conversation, right?
that's a different conversation. And property insurance is actually relatively simple. You have a building, you have a structure, you have, and in commercial terms, you have a business that's going on within that. The building is affected by a loss, be it fire, be it natural catastrophe, be it an object falling from the sky, be it boiler and machinery explosion or breakdown or mechanical derangement.
Sure.
That in turn causes damage to the structure of the building and or the contents and machinery within, which in turn then produces a business interruption or time element loss,
Okay.
which means that the business is been affected. Therefore, the client, if it's directly related to the insured loss, the time element loss will pick up that loss of business up until the building's rebuilt with an extended period of indemnity, if that's purchased, to allow the client's market um, to be resuming to pre-loss levels. So it
For
is
sure.
actually relatively simple. Um, the inherent risks are many and legion. You only have to look in the United States. The number of natural catastrophe events has been increasing year on year. Now, there's many reasons for that. There is climate change. There is also human development in areas which are more prone to natural catastrophe events. And in addition to that, the natural catastrophe events have become just a little bit more unpredictable and severe in their nature. And that's due to global warming plus also increased building. Um, in addition to that, there's also the human element risks. So maintenance is not undertaken. There might be an issue with hot works where there is blow torches being used for repairs,
Mm,
maintenance, or extensions.
sure.
There might be somebody just literally flicks the wrong switch, and that causes a chain of events where the ensuing loss is covered. There can also be on the time element side what we call contingent time element. Now, that is where if if a supplier's or client's building catches fire and the supplier or the client is unable to supply or to take finished goods from the manufacturer, then the expenses and the loss of income which is incurred from that can be covered under contingent time elements. So there's a number of risks that can be covered under your
Okay.
standard all risk policy.
Gotcha. And so when you think about these risks, Matt, and it seems like insurance companies assess these risks based on the consistency that these risks are starting to show up. So, for example, when it comes to the weather, right? Nobody wants to believe the changes that we're going through, so that's fine. But the weather is constantly, we're having storm after storm after storm. And to me, what it seems like is when these insurance companies leave particular areas, it seems like there's a gap that's left here. And I don't know. So kind of explain to me, because I think that's really how these insurance premiums are increasing. Would that be accurate?
There's a number of reasons, but Maurice, that's
Okay.
certainly one of the reasons why that's happening. The market is a market, and we've got to remember this. A lot of clients think my business has been profitable over 20 years. I should be getting rates reductions year on year. Well, it's a pool. It's basically all of the premiums are pulled together, and then insurers have what is known as a combined ratio. So that is their earnings versus what they pay out, and that payout is their operating costs, wages, rent for the buildings, as well as claims that get filed. So they generally want to have a combined ratio of somewhere in the early 90s, early 90%. So they're making a profit of, say, 8, 9%. That's a healthy
Sure.
return. Anything less than that, then they are fleecing their clients, you could potentially say, but we won't say that. They're being very prudent underwriters. But
That's
what we
right.
want to do is make sure that um, there is sufficient profitable premium in the market, and the insurers are working for profit, well, with a few exceptions who are mutuals. So there is that. The natural catastrophe losses have been a driver, and it's been a driver for two reasons. One is the available treaty capacity that's available for insurers. So that is the amount of risk that they will offset to treaty reinsurers over their entire books. Treaty costs have gone up as natural catastrophe events happen. And in addition to that, there has just been more instances, or there was over a period of time, more instances of more losses coming into the market, man-made as well, which
Yeah.
then reduces combined ratios. And combined ratios, when they dip over the 100%, then there's some real problems.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Mm.
And take us through this part right here. So stock throughput, cargo insurance. Explain to us how does that work? In what instance would you need this?
So stock throughput is essentially an extension of a marine insurance policy, and it provides coverage for an insured's inventory, so their stock, and that includes raw materials, work in progress, and also finished goods anywhere in the world. Now, how it helps is that it gives broader insurance for inventory risks moving throughout the supply chain. Many property policies will exclude or limit coverage for goods, especially outside of the United States. There might be restrictions on, for example, distributing in Turkey or in Japan where there's a big earthquake risk. In the event of damage, because that's in the event of by natural disasters, stock throughput policies take into account that goods are constantly moving through the world and the supply chain. So there's absolutely no dispute on which coverage applies to a claim, be it cargo or be it property. It's bringing the two together. A stock throughput policy also provides selling price for finished goods, which is not always the case on a property policy, where they might
Okay.
allow for one-off BI or time element losses. Additionally, a stock throughput policy provides earthquake, wind, and flood generally at lower deductibles. So a difference in conditions policy, so that's reducing cost, is not necessarily required. So it's a kind of wrap between your cargo and your property policy. It's giving people end-to-end sleep easy cover for all of their for all of their supply chain goods, whether they are, as I said, raw materials, work in process, or finished goods.
Got it. And okay, so in the insurances that you're explaining, these are in addition to maybe your base insurance to help cover those gaps, right?
That's correct. It's giving belt
Okay.
what we call in London belt and braces cover on
Okay.
the for people that are transporting goods.
Got it. All right. And are you noticing a trend in particular states within the U.S. that you're seeing yourself having to cover people in this particular arena?
Not really states, but what we are seeing is certainly in sectors.
Sectors. Okay.
So in the manufacturing sectors. So for example, automotive manufacturers, stock throughput is quite difficult to get the desired cover that people want. There have been a lot of issues, particularly with electric cars with lithium batteries. I would suggest to anybody to YouTube. There was a big loss in Dutch
Yes.
waters recently, where a cargo ship sank. There's also some lovely footage of what happens when seawater mixes up with lithium batteries, and it's like a
Mm.
firework display. Each one of the cars explodes.
Gotcha.
So that is quite a difficult sector to go through. There can also be with cars and vehicles as well, stock in the open. So there have been a number of quite significant losses that have come about through hail losses around the world. So reinsurers and insurers will only really cover vehicles in the open if there are hail net protections.
Got it. All right.
Some other sectors, just to note,
Sure.
which are difficult. Anything of high value which can be kind of easily stolen in certain areas. So, for example, mobile phones and tablets.
Mm.
You might find that there is a little bit of a restriction. What we have seen, particularly in Europe, is where there have been instances where there have been mixed occupancy warehousing, and security guards have been working with criminal gangs in order to take crates of mobile phones and tablets.
Makes sense.
That
Okay.
can produce some issues. But if it's not the manufacturer and they've done all their due diligence and it is criminal activity, yeah, this is something that the market will work with people on highlighting and flushing out. There is
Yeah.
zero tolerance to that kind of behavior and activity. Tobacco,
Sure.
that can be quite difficult as well. Tobacco
Oh, okay.
products
Right.
and also alcohol in some areas as well, particularly distilled and finished alcohol that's ready for sale. It's amazing how in some ports how much of that stuff just disappears, and
Yeah.
amazing. And also some things like bananas and easily perishable food, because they can deteriorate quite quickly and cause total losses.
Makes sense. And that's interesting. So what I'm hearing and I'm understanding in this is that there is a lot of theft that goes on in the background that we're not seeing and that we're not including when we see these insurance companies bump up their rates. Is that what I'm hearing?
There certainly has been, and there has been
Okay.
misappropriation, but the industry, the warehousing industry, is getting a lot better at this, and a lot with the
It is. Okay, good.
computerization and the automation of ports. Security is getting a lot tighter. It certainly is a trend that we are seeing. There's just one other thing that we should mention at the moment, given the
Sure.
geopolitical issues in the world. With stock throughput, there is an element of war cover that is available
Mm,
to buyers, which is typically through Lloyd's of London. And that is, as we're seeing at the moment, the Houthis in the Yemen are attacking ships that are passing through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. There is some cover that is available for that. Maybe not as much as clients would wish to purchase, but it certainly is available to a degree.
makes sense. Wow. Well, this is always another product within the insurance, which is important, is products liability. And a couple of questions for those, especially that are listening. How does it work? And also what's available for clients? You want to go ahead and take us down that pathway?
I will do. So, really, we think, or we would recommend you consider product liability if your business designs, manufactures, or supplies a physical
Okay.
product that is sold or given away. Your product may be legally held responsible for injuries to people or damage to property caused
Mm,
by a faulty product. And
got
you
it.
can be held liable for faulty products if you do not manufacture them. So, you may be liable for compensation if your business's name is on the product, your business repairs, refurbishes, or changes a product. You import products from certain countries and regions, and you cannot identify the product's manufacturer, or the manufacturer has got out of business. Now, quite often in some Asian countries where we see it's sometimes very difficult to track the actual manufacturer down, there might be holding
Sure.
companies, etc. So it's quite important in that respect. What product liability insurance covers, it protects you against the cost of compensation for personal injuries caused by the faulty product,
Mm,
loss of damage to property caused by the faulty product, unforeseeable circumstances such as the product faults that your quality control system could not identify. Product insurance liability, it's also important for us to say, um, just to say a couple of things and what it might not cover, which is faulty products resulting from bad workmanship and financial losses to a business or person that's caused by the faulty product.
got it.
Rick, do you have anything you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, what I'm really seeing here in the States is companies that used to be classified purely as a distributor.
Mm.
If they import anything, they're now considered the manufacturer because, like you said,
Okay.
you don't know who the original manufacturer is. So insurance companies are changing their ratings. Companies that have been distributors for years now, all of a sudden, they're manufacturers, and they wonder why their premium is jumping. It's a story that needs to be explained. The only time I've been able to get around that and keep them as a distributor, if I could get a certificate of insurance showing where the stuff was manufactured and that endorsement, so that my client was free and clear. But they're better off having they still need the coverage, because even if they get out of the lawsuit, they still have to pay the attorney to take care of the claim. So it's an interesting coverage right now.
So, and this is interesting, and I want everybody to really pay attention to this, because when you think about the amount of dynamics that are included, that's the right word, that are included in all these policies. Because when it comes to insurance, you guys are really identifying with the dynamics that could potentially happen, and that you're seeing consistently happen month after month, or you see a trend. It could be a 2024 trend, but one thing I learned about insurance companies, it may happen for a little bit, but you be rest assured the insurance company will catch up and change. So that's just really what we're seeing as far as these coverages, and just kind of how so even Rick was talking about there's lawyers involved in this whole process, right?
Oh yeah.
So there's just a lot of moving parts.
All of these moving parts, the client doesn't see. All they see is, man, my premium just went up. So going through the explanation with the clients, and I'm working on articles now talking about the reinsurance. Reinsurance in California is a reason carriers are leaving the state. By California law, carriers are not allowed to charge the cost of the reinsurance in their policy, which is crazy. They can't sit there and eat that up. Let's see, I'm going to eat my profit, or I'm going to leave the state. I think I'll leave the state. So in California, especially, they need to take a look at what they're doing with their laws and regulations if they want to help the client or anyone stay in business.
Sure.
That's the end of my political statements.
Okay. Well, let's bring this up because we're on the hot topic here, and this is another one which is important, is loss examples. So we've been talking about property, stock throughput, cargo insurance, products liability. Matt, take us down this pathway and let us know why this slide is in particular so important.
So a loss example that can hit manufacturers is, I'll take two. I'll take one as direct loss and one as contingent time element. So very simply, machinery breakdown. So
Okay.
A lot of manufacturers will rely on a lot of equipment in order to manufacture their goods. This equipment can be very specialized. It can take quite a long time to get equipment and spare parts in certain cases. It might mean shipping parts from overseas. It might well mean having specialists come in and actually fit it. There might only be one or two specialists in the state that are able or licensed to do this. Now, in that event, it's got to make sure that there is, if that does happen, if there is a machinery breakdown event, there is a derangement event, that the parts are covered, that the workmanship and the repair is covered, and that the ensuing BI is covered as far as it can. You've got to make sure as well that it's very clear when it comes down to how the deductibles work. There will probably be what we call a flat dollar deductible for the PD loss. And there would be average days, so it might be 7 days of the total loss. So say the machinery breakdown causes 30 days shutdown of or cessation of activities. The first 7 days of those will be payable by the client. That will be the deductible that will be retained by the client. So it's very important to understand all of those items. The second is loss scenario for contingent time element.
Yeah.
I'll use the automotive manufacturing industry because that is one that unfortunately suffers a contagion of losses when these things happen.
Okay.
But there was a loss in the US before COVID where there's only a handful of gearbox casing manufacturers who manufacture casings for performance cars, high performance cars and vehicles. And unfortunately, there was a blast furnace loss, which caused a $500 million, $500 million loss for the manufacturer itself, total shutdown. Now, the contagion that came after that was that every single automotive manufacturer, bar only a handful in the US, suffered losses because they were unable to receive the casings from the manufacturer. Excuse me. So what happened was the insurers were paying out multiple losses to the manufacturer itself, and then each one of the automotive manufacturers, and also spare parts manufacturers and component manufacturers, who were suffering from contingent time element loss from that because they were unable to source the goods from the manufacturer that had burnt down. So again, it's very important to make sure that if you are dependent upon certain manufacturers, that there is contingent time element which does reflect does reflect that. And there's a number of different terms that are used within that can be quite confusing. First tier, second tier, direct, indirect, all of these are suppliers. So suppliers of suppliers is a common way, and it can trip people up when it comes to loss scenarios.
Yeah, no doubt. When I think about this, Matt, and as you're talking, so let's say, because a lot of businesses like to be big, you see an opportunity, you have an opportunity to host your business overseas as well, to make more of a global expansion, to increase profits and revenue. But in those increases, in that decision, you're actually increasing risk all in the same breath, right?
Absolutely, not just your physical risk is increasing, and yes, the supply chain route becomes a lot more complicated.
Yeah. All
And
right.
do you know, Maurice, that is a very, very good point, and something that we should point out as well. A lot of people in the United States, their policy region will only be the 50 states of the United States. That's it.
Right.
As we are now seeing, Mexico is the largest
That's right.
exporter to the United States. So if the
Mhm.
policy's territory is just the United States, and you are reliant upon a manufacturer in Mexico, then contingent time element will not apply. It will be excluded because the territorial scope is limited to the United States. The devil's in the detail.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay. Man, this is a good show. Thank you. Here's another pathway I want you to take us down, which is global issues to consider. And what do you want to give us on this one?
I would just say that there are different business insurance customs. There are different
Okay.
ways of saying things around the world. So, for example, in the United States, you say time element. Most other countries say business interruption. And there's different meanings for fire, for Flexa, for all risk, for deductibles, excesses, co-insurance. So it's making sure that if you do have policies for subsidiaries separately to your cover in the United States, that you make sure that you understand the policy language and the implication of the different policy language and how that could potentially affect a loss in the country in which the policy is valid. It can be a bit of a minefield, and it's something where clients have been consistently disappointed when it comes down to losses. Rick, have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
Professionals that understand what they're doing.
Mm.
I have 40 years or so of knowledge in the insurance industry, but I rely on experts like Matt when I'm, doing something overseas or another part of the country. Like I said, Mexico, not the normal place. You have to add additional covers to take care of that stuff. It's the world is becoming closer together, yet the insurance policies are specific to areas. So you have to figure out where you tie them together so you don't end up with a big hole in the middle.
Absolutely, Rick. You're totally right. I mean, it can be, let me say, very, very confusing for buyers. So always take, let me say, the professional assistance.
Yeah. And, it's Matt and Rick, we are in the do-it-yourself society. And with the do-it-yourself society, that means people are going online to find these insurances, and they're getting taken in by the rate. It looks cheaper. It's what you think you need, and you go get it. And all of a sudden, that incident tends to happen. And then now you're at a loss. Now you're upset with the insurance company because you think you purchased it. And in effect, you actually did not. And so how important is it for people to start to reassess and think about, talking to a professional nowadays before they make particular moves? Because what I'm feeling is that this do-it-yourself society is really hurting themselves, not really propelling themselves.
There's no way to, they think everything you see online is correct. Hey, this is Geico, 15 minutes will save you 15%. I can do that all day long. All I do is cut your coverage. People think folks like Matt and I are gouging them to get their insurance. We're doing the proper job for them. We're making sure there's not holes. And I have my marketing people saying, "Oh, you ought to do more on the internet. Get these people." I don't want the people that are out there searching around on the internet for coverage, because all they care about is price, and that's the last thing I care about. I care but I got to make sure that coverage is correct. So I don't have time to fool around with somebody that I spend hours explaining how a coverage works and why it's needed. Think, oh no, that's too expensive. I only want to pay $1.98. Unfortunately, I have to leave those people aside and work with the people that want to work with professionals. And you just keep reaching out, and you have your initial conversation. You ask hard questions, and if you get the answers that tend to say that I really don't want to work with that person, got to let it go and move on to the next person.
Sure.
And
what is your?
I just wanted to add one thing to that. I totally agree with everything Rick's saying. It's totally correct. One other thing that I would add, just with regards to price and worldwide cover, is quite often you get a cheap price. You'll find that not only is the cover poor, but also it's about the carrier's willingness to pay. And you'll find in certain parts of the world that there is a different business culture. There is a different way of going about matters, and the willingness to pay is very, very different. So it's always worth checking. It's my job to make sure that my policies are paid out wherever they are in the world. We do a lot of extensive work on this. We have a central security committee that checks the reinsurers and the carriers that we're working with. And I've got nearly 30 years experience now in Europe, North America, Asia, the Middle East. We know who are reliable, good insurers, and as Rick say, it might cost a few dollars more, but it's very much worth it.
And gentlemen, and Matt, you said this just a minute ago in your conversation when you're talking about global issues to consider. You said one word which is huge: the language. When it comes to insurance, the language matters because it's what they're saying, how they're covering, what they see. You can see excluding Mexico. And if you have not read that, if you got the cheaper insurance and you brought the exclusion as well of Mexico, right? So you're buying the language, not you're just buying a service, you're buying the language of that product that you have. And I think that's a huge understanding that people need to shift towards when it comes to this business insurance. Does that sound accurate?
That does. Rick, have you got something you'd like to add on that?
Language is critical. It's more important to read the exclusions than the covers. Read the exclusions and then go back to see what's covered, because what's going to cause you the problem is the exclusion. And there's, like you said, the devil is in the details. You have to go through those exclusions because there might be some, I insure a lot of property, and now they're adding a habitational exclusion all over the place, which doesn't do my property folks much good. So I'm seeking out carriers that have that. So it used to be a standard coverage for residential properties and commercial properties and all that for cover the habitational stuff. Now, all of a sudden, all the policies are excluding it. So, I got 20 declinations on one policy, and I finally found one that actually gave me the cover I want. So folks like myself and Matt are working a lot harder to take care of the clients just because of the marketplace. It's not anything the client sees. All they see is the final product we present to them. But there's a lot of behind the scenes work that is done to make that happen.
For sure. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say one of the areas that we try to avoid, and I'm sure Rick does as well, is endless endorsements. It can often be carriers have their reasons for producing endorsements. They have to produce regulatory endorsements, for example, for the different states in the US, but there's also regulatory clauses. In the UK, we've got Paul Re, which covers terrorism. In France, you've got Catastrophe Naturelle, which is the NatCat pool consortio, which covers a wide bunch of perils, both social and physical, in Spain. But making sure that these endorsements and these additional coverages are understood by the client is absolutely vital. I spent the first 7 years of my life in the insurance industry writing and reading wordings and policy forms. And it's the best training that you can possibly have when you go in there, because as Rick rightly says, understanding the detail and understanding what's excluded is so important.
And gentlemen, again, go ahead.
Your hair is spinning all those years doing that.
No, I have nothing to say to that because you're probably right. I mean, it's just part of the process. But gentlemen, we're going to just wrap up this conversation. We've covered quite a bit, and I hope everybody that has heard this as far as the manufacturing industry has really taken this conversation to heart. Rick, I want to go ahead and give you the floor for some final thoughts, and Matt, we'll come to you.
I want to especially thank Matt for being here. He has some great information. He has a lot of experience. Heck, this was the easiest show I had to do. I just got to listen to the experts like the rest of you. My biggest takeaway is you need to deal with professionals or you're going to be in trouble when there's a loss. You need to make sure everything is properly covered, endorsed, written, whatever. It's the marketplace is changing faster than we can keep up with it.
All right. Thank you for that. And Matt, what about you? What are your final thoughts?
I would just say, firstly, thank you for inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure to present, and hopefully the viewers have found this interesting and informative. I echo Rick's comments. It's so important to understand what you're buying, the quality of the product that you're buying, and what the end result would be in the event that there was a loss. So always seek assistance from professionals, advice from professionals when making your insurance and reinsurance decisions.
Amazing. Gentlemen, on behalf of Executive Talk, I would like to thank both of you, Rick, always for your vast amount of knowledge and just taking us down each pathway of business, of all the business sectors when it comes to business insurance. And it's also, Matt, to take your time out of your schedule all the way from London to talk to us and provide this depth of information. So I really do appreciate the both of you for everything you provided for us today. Matt, we're going to see you next time because, again, you have a whole bunch of conversations that you want to talk about. So let's go ahead and keep you coming back. And we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Real pleasure and glad to assist.
All right. We'll see both of you next time and we'll go from there. And for all those that are watching, I want to have everybody pause. And the pause is cost. I understand prices are going up all across the board, but quality is also not going up across the board. We're seeing a discrepancy here. And so when Matt and when Rick are talking about the cost and sometimes what needs to happen, I understand. I'm with you. Nobody wants to see an increase in cost, but you also want to see quality go with that cost. And with your business model, the way that it is, the amount of risk that are involved within your manufacturing business, it is important to make sure that you're just paying the right cost. Make sure you're getting the right coverage, because nobody wants to see your business fail because because of your exposure. Make sure you are taking care of your business because people need you. People need you to be around. The people that are employed by your company need you to be around. So this is bigger than just the cost of the premiums that Matt and also Rick are maybe proposing to you. This is a whole conglomerate. You're responsible for a lot. And I know that you know that. And I want to make sure that we just reiterate the value in which Matt and Rick are bringing to the table in today's conversation. So take this conversation for what it is and all these other insurances that come, because again, these risks are changing. The world is changing. It's getting a lot crazier and it's becoming riskier. So just making sure that your manufacturing business is on point because you're covered correctly is what we're here to do. And I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to hear what they had to say. And again, feel free to reach out to them. They're on the Executive Talk Network. You can reach Matt and you can also reach Rick. They work really well together and they'll help you out. But in the meantime, the three of us, we actually have to get back to work. So we'll see you next time. Have a good day.